and some एक महावीर भगवान पे किताब लिखी है बच्चों की, नॉन वायलेंस पे गांधी इंस्टीट्यूट अरुण गांधी के साथ काम करा है, तल्ला दलाल जी के साथ, हमारी मदर के साथ एक जैन फूड भी बुक पे लिखा है। पर मैं जो करता हूँ काम वो काफ़ी मेडिटेशन पे, ओवर माइंडफुलनेस पे भी करता हूँ, एंड राइट इन द वॉशिंगटन पोस्ट, न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स अबाउट health and wellness, but also about Jain values, because that is what had percolates through me. So that is a bit of my background. So Yogen bhai, why are we here? I mean, अपन क्यों ये कर रहे हैं, क्यों बातचीत कर रहे हैं, ये जैन पैथ और जैन वे ऑफ लाइफ के बारे में क्या हो रहा है इस दुनिया में, क्या हो रहा है अपनी लाइव्स में, that is making us do this?
Great question. As we all know, the world is changing at an exponential rate. In the past, war, disease, and famine were the main cause of violence and death and destruction. But those, luckily, are not as prevalent. And so now we're seeing so many changes that are happening. And if you look on this slide here, we see number one is a homogenization. That is, there is a great mixing of the melting pot that's happening. You may have noticed many mixed marriages happening here in India, as well as 50% here in the US. Life pressure is tremendous in terms of we are now spending most of our energy in education, in our career building, in entertainment, glued to Netflix and others. And as we live to almost be 90 or 100 years old, if we don't have a sense of purpose, if we don't manage these pressures of life and help our kids manage, and we might take a completely different direction, which may not give us our eventual goal, which be happiness.
So what I'm hearing is that the world is changing around us. मैं सुन रहा हूँ कि ये सब changes हो रहे हैं, and the question is, क्या अपन और that अपने आप को उस changes से accommodate कर रहे हैं या नहीं? क्या अपना धर्म वो ही changes को accommodate कर रहा है या नहीं? That is the major propelling reason that we need to be talking about. And we can have an individual conversation, but it is so much more powerful when we have a collective conversation, which is how do we move forward, both as an individual and as a community and as a religion. So, agar aap soch rahe hain ki why are we here together, it is to talk about this collective movement that we would like to have a conversation about. And so our religion has many treasures, and maybe sort of walk us through some of the things, and we will be putting them in the context of the Jain path and Jain way of life, and hear more about some of that. But tell us, what is the Jain way of life?
Sure. Hey, Edwin, if you can go back to the slide for a second, please.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention a couple of other pressures that we're facing. One is obviously divisions in our religion. We seem to every 10 years or 20 years invent some more ways to divide ourselves. And also the complexity of our religion hasn't decreased much. I can tell you all sorts of stories why Buddhism is 100 times more pervasive than Jainism is. But anyways, in addition to that, so the question really comes out is, when we do go through these 4 sessions, what is it in it for me? Mujhe kya milega is in 4 sessions say. And what we would like to share is not only greater awareness, not only way we can strengthen, unify our community, how we can make this world a better place, but the most important thing is, because we'll be having these 4 sessions, I like to think that we'll be happier and we'll have more equanimity over our lives. And that is our goal, and we hope we will be able to achieve it. So let's get to, So the question is, what is Jain way of life?
Yes. So tell us about
about 15 years ago, we went and randomly surveyed Jains and asked them, what is Jainism? And we got answers like, oh, hum Hindu religion ke saath hain, humko moksha aana hai, hamare 24 tirthankars hain. And these were executives of Jain centers and communities. And we even asked Jains in India and lay people. And we got some very mixed messages as to what is Jainism. And that actually led us to the development of this book, where we documented as you would document a product. And the one thing that came out is Jainism has treasures. And when I
very
present,
much so. Very much
and
so.
when I present Jainism to high school kids, so I get a chance to teach American high school kids here. And Manoj, I know you also are teaching and presenting Jainism to non-Jain audience. We tell them that Jains, for thousands of years, we've been vegetarians. Next slide.
Right.
For thousands of years, we've been practicing equality and equity.
Yes, very much so. So there are clearly lots of treasures that we have in our religion. And so
yes,
Jain way of life is really about those practices, those treasures that are in our religion. And the concern is that, are those treasures important today or irrelevant today? And how do we put it into context of the day-to-day? So what is your thought? Do you think our religion is important, critical for today, or is it obsolete?
You know, if you look at the numbers, it is not even a blip. We're only 5 million Jains, and it is so disheartening to be part of what I believe is one of the greatest treasures and not being able to share that treasure for whatever reason. For thousands of years.
Like Anekantvad. I mean, you just take a look at it. The idea of Anekantvad is so critically important if people understand it. And in business, they're using those very concepts. दूसरे धर्मों में इस अनेकांतवाद जैसी चीज है ही नहीं. That is critically important to keep in mind.
Exactly.
So
if you look at this, 2,500 years ago, we had these treasures. We had written this. We have been preaching this. And
yes,
imagine for a second, just take a moment and think back. If we had shared these treasures with the larger world 2,500 years ago, even 1,000 years ago, even 100 saal pehle apan share karte this world se, we could have averted millions of death. No, I think billions.
Yeah.
Actually, I think
the world could have been
billions.
a different. But we still have an opportunity now. We have an opportunity now to share many of these key principles. So I want to go into, if someone asks you, Yogan Bhai, what is Jainism? Can you take us through a conversation on how does one explain ki Jain Dharm kya hai, and in a very simple, precise way?
So this is an outcome of 2 years of research.
Yes.
This is an outcome of 2 years of research. And when I sit on a plane and I'm sitting next to someone and there's a conversation, this is how I explain to them. And I've done this hundreds of times. We talk about, oh yeah, Jainism. What's Jainism? Yeah, it's a religion and a way of life. For thousands of years, we've been practicing vegetarianism, yoga, meditation, and environmentalism. Why do we say those four words, by the way? Those are the most common words that's happening in health and wellness today. Imagine that.
Very nice.
Then I say, I have 3 core principles.
Right.
The first one is non-violence. That is the reason why I'm a vegetarian.
Right.
Then
So
I say my
non-violence.
second one, and by the way, I always use my fingers to share, just because it reinforces, is non-absolutism, which means I will take the time to understand your views, and I'll share my view.
Got it.
And Manoj,
Okay.
you wrote a book on this, and we'll talk about this later a lot more.
Absolutely.
Right? And then I say my third core principle is non-possessiveness. That means I will be balancing my needs and desires.
Got it.
And
So
then
I
I
see.
say these
Yes.
core principles help me manage my anger, ego, greed, deceit. And if I can do that,
the kashais, the four kashais, char kashai, krodh, man, maya, lobh.
We keep it simple.
Yes.
It helps us manage. We don't say get rid of. We don't get all worked up about it. We say manage. And if I can manage these, not only I'll be happy, people around me and this world will be a happier place. Just like you ask a Miss Universe contestant, and they all say we want to make this world a happier place. Well, we do.
Right.
Sorry, didn't mean to go on and on, but I hope you get the idea of Manoj. One of the biggest things that when I visit India, when I visit our beautiful, beautiful temples and structures, not a single place there's a simplified definition of Jainism. Right. Not in Delwara temples, not in some of the beautiful temples in Khajuraho.
Got it. So I'm going to ask you again, I'm going to ask, we have a wonderful, talented group of people. Everyone will get to introduce themselves over the next 4 weeks. This is a conversation. And now we have shared with you some of the treasures. I want to ask you, for you, what are some treasures of Jainism? So maybe very briefly, a few people share, and then we'll go on to further conversation. Maybe Sahil, you and I, we were chatting, you can start off. What are some treasures in Jainism that you want your great-grandchildren to have? Your thoughts on that?
The one that resonates with me the most and has led me on my journey is the non-violence, ahimsa. And I realized, initially I thought it's non-violence in the outer world, but it's also in the inner world. It's also to the self.
Yes.
And so when you start becoming more compassionate and you have more self-love and you have more love around you, then the world can be a much better place. But it starts with you. You have to first remove the violence within.
Exactly.
You can focus as much as you want on the outside, and that's very good, but you have to focus on the inner violence as well. And so once you are able to overcome, or like you said, manage, right? I don't think you can ever remove it completely. Then the world becomes a better place, because then you start seeing, okay, so you've worked on yourself, and then when you look at the exterior, you don't look at just the food, because yes, of course, we're vegetarian, but a lot of dairy farming is not how it used to be, for example. And so you're now seeing a lot of Jains turning vegan because they're saying, I don't agree with how milk how the cows are treated. Now, maybe someone has it in their own farm and the cows are not mistreated, different story. But what we find in the supermarkets can be quite. We don't know how that's affecting the society and the animal welfare. We talk about all these things, but yet we look at leather belts. So I think a lot of it is also non-awareness. So I think the first thing is just education, because once people start to find out that this is what's happening, they go, I don't know, why am I wearing these leather shoes, or why do I have a leather handbag or leather belt, and why am I wearing silk? Why am I cutting, buying flowers for people? Let me give a plant instead. So, but if you don't educate, you'll just continue with whatever you've learned from your community or from your family or ancestors. But that's why it's very important, I find, to educate. And having books like Jain Way of Life, I just want to mention one thing on that. What I really liked about the book was not focused on rituals. And one of the biggest flaws I feel in our religion and why it's only 5 million people, as you said, is only the rituals are passed down. The concepts are not discussed. The education part is missing. And so when I read this book, for me, it was a game changer because until then, I didn't value the religion. And it's only after reading that book, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much more to it than saying just the prayers or going to mandir and, you know, doing this and doing that. It talked about how you become a better human being and how you live life. And so education, awareness, I mean, that's what's required from the community.
Absolutely. So we'll be talking about that. How do we change the education, knowledge, awareness to attitude change and then to behavior change, right? There is a continuum of changing knowledge, changing behavior, attitude, and then changing practices. और अपन जैन धर्म में भी ये related concepts है, सम्यक दर्शन, सम्यक ज्ञान और सम्यक चरित, right? Changing behavior, Samyak Charit, is that same idea of changing behavior. Samyak Gyan is that right knowledge, right? So all of that is a common phenomena, but we have to put it into a concepts that we, in modern day, we talk about into. Anyone else would like to share what treasures are there in Jainism? अपने धर्म में क्या ऐसे treasures हैं that आप चाहते हैं अपनी लाइफ में अपने बच्चों को ग्रैंडचिल्ड्रंस को शेयर करना चाहते हैं? Anyone else would like to share?
Jai Jain uncles.
Jai Jain, yes.
I think one of the most important treasures that I find in Jainism has to be the forgiveness aspect of it. How we are so in tune with all the other living things that we ask for forgiveness for hurting them. It's not just the humans that we're asking forgiveness from.
Yes.
I think that's one key core aspect of Jainism for me.
Very nice. Very nice. And anyone else?
Can I come in here?
Yes.
So for me, for the longest time, I've thought that this whole idea of mindfulness, which permeates the way we live, I think that's very important because it's so that whole concept of being mindful, you know, vastu ke swaroop ko pehchaniye, har cheez ke swaroop ko pehchaniye, ya uske, ya be present in everything, be mindful. So that, and mindfulness needs to compassion, mindfulness needs to an understanding of purpose, mindfulness and leads to discerning the, you know, what is right from what is wrong or what is appropriate. Mindfulness also leads to compassion because it's mindfulness not just of ourselves, but mindfulness of the other thing or person or living beings, mindfulness also, and importance of being also. So for me, mindfulness is a very powerful concept.
Wonderful. And Pallavi, maybe a quick introduction of who you are and where you're from.
So I live in Bhopal and I'm in the civil services. And currently I'm working with the tribal communities in Madhya Pradesh. So I'll be happy to connect with everybody. I don't want to, you know, talk about my profession much, but it's just that it's a great thing to talk to like-minded individuals. And as you just said, I would just like to also make this point that for the young people to have pride in their own religion and their own way of life, understanding. So I think pride comes from understanding. And, despite having had a very sort of a cosmopolitan education, I think one of the reasons why I was able to also impart to my children the Jain way of life is that it was not an imposition of our practice, but it was just to put in front of them what the Jain way of life is, and to make them understand the right from wrong, or what do they want to do going ahead. And I think more and more young people need to be, I think it's a great idea that we are putting it in those many terms, because they do not really understand, you know, you put the Granth in front of them, they may not be able to understand the Shrut, traditions, they may not be able to understand because it's all a little in hardcore language. So it's breaking it down into things that, you know, people can understand and relate to in their lives, which gives them, and it gives them the strength. It gives a lot of strength.
Good. So let us try to put all of some of these concepts together. You can see my screen. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we talked about the Jain way of life and the practices. We heard about adding the concept of some people like nonviolence, some people like forgiveness as a core, mindfulness. इन सब चीजों को अपन common language, common platform में कैसे bind कर सकते हैं? The idea of Jain path is that very thing. How do you translate the many jewels of Jainism? So over the next 5 to 10 minutes, let me take you through a construct which for the past 10 years that the group of individuals have been thinking and working on. कि ये Jain path क्या है? It begins with the first step कि what is our goal? अपन life में क्या चाहते हैं? And our goal is happiness. We'll define what is happiness. Not let us not talk and think altogether what it is right now, but it is also equanimity or फिर एक level of happiness ही अपन चाहते हैं goal to achieve moksha. But then the question is, how does one go there? What are the steps that will lead us to that? And that is that we have to have a sense of philosophy. From philosophy will come principles, and from principles will come practices. And Sahil, I agree with you. Rituals get overrated and they take over everything, but they are side players, as are festivals, which are colorful, enjoyable, and so forth. The core concepts is this. अपन को Jain philosophy के बारे में बातें करनी है, Jain principles or Jain practices. What are these constructs? What is philosophy? Philosophy is a fundamental nature of reality. तो जो अपना philosophical construct thinking है Jainism में, it is very different from Christianity. For example, अपना belief है कि जीव अजीव में categorization होता है. Christianity में belief क्या है? God or no God. So they don't see things otherwise. There is a God and the God does everything. From the philosophy come the key truths derived from the philosophy. They lead to principles, which then lead to practices. Or फिर अपन मन वचन काय, thought, speech, and action, way of acting and conducting those practices happens. So the construct we're going to be talking about, philosophy, principles, practices. Now let's add a little bit of more material to this and understand this better. अपन जानते हैं अपने धर्म में फिलॉसफी क्या है, द्रव के बारे में बातें करते हैं, जीव अजीव पुद्गल, धर्म, आकाश, काल, all are part of the substances, the 7 and the 9 tattvas that are there. That's the philosophy. Principles क्या हैं? अपने अनुव्रत, right? Ahimsa, achorya, aparigara, brahmacharya, or for apni practices as well. How do we take those and put them in the construct that we are now building? So Jain philosophy में अपन अपने द्रव्य रख सकते हैं, Jain principles में अपने अनुव्रत रख सकते हैं, or propelling us towards moksha is samyak darshan, samyak gyan, samyak charit, right faith, right conduct, and right knowledge. So that is the construct that is we're moving towards. Philosophy, principles, practices. Let us take this to a deeper step now. Okay? Philosophy में क्या, अगर मैं किसी को समझाता हूँ जो Jain है या Jain नहीं है, या even our kids, if I have a conversation about dravas and tattvas, they begin to lose you very quickly. So how do I do it? I say we're going to talk about the theory of life, theory of soul, theory of karma, theory of moksha. We'll get into those in a little bit of more detail, but we put it in the concept that these are theories. So that is where it makes sense. We can talk about theory is Jain philosophy. Then we can say, what are the Jain principles? Jain principles kya hain? Yes, 5 anuvrat hain, but if you look at Tattvat Sutra, and I will say jo apni Bible hai, if you can see, ये अपनी जो जैन धर्म की बौद्ध दिगंबर श्वेतांबर सबकी बाइबल है, तत्वात सूत्र है, और मैं इसके हर चैप्टर हर वर्स मैंने पढ़ा हुआ है, And जो किताब जो ये वाली लिखी है, the one that is written, the translation by Natmal Tatia, he was at Harvard 25 years ago. Myself, our family had great chance to spend lots of time with him. So he begins with the very fact that the core of Jain principles are ahimsa, anikvat, aparigraha, the triple A's. ठीक है. If philosophy is theory of life, theory of soul, theory of karma, and the principles are ahimsa, anikantvad, aparigraha, what are the practices? Practices is what we've talked about, right? Vegetarianism or vegan, yoga, exercise, forgiveness, compassion, respect, open-mindedness, many practices. But we have to put those practices in the words of our youth, of our generation, of people who may not be Jain, who will better understand those practices. So in brief, what we are talking about, Yogan Bhai, is that philosophy leading to principles, and principles then subsequently leading to Jain practices, and Samyak Darshan, Samyak Gyan, Samyak Charit, Jain way of life, moving us forward in there. And yes, puja,
the most
aarti, and
interesting,
so yes, please.
Manoj bhai, this is a beautiful construct. The part of this construct that is the most interesting, of course, all of it is interesting, and the most hard to understand is the one that's on the top, the happiness, the equanimity, the moksha. I think it'd be good if we can spend a couple of minutes, because I know in the sessions that will follow, we'll talk a lot more about that.
Yes.
But I don't know about you guys, but happiness is a very important part of what I strive to have on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, yearly.
Absolutely. So we will be doing actually Jain path journey exercises on measuring our level of happiness and how to become more happy. So we'll get to that in a minute. So here is the construct under which we will be having a conversation. Jain philosophy, Jain principles, Jain practices. We have a couple of minutes if people have a question on this, and then I will share how this is a bit different from how other concepts may be. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to move ahead. How is this different, the Jain path and Jain way of life, from what we know about Jainism before? And here is the difference. अपन जब ट्रेडिशनल जैनिज्म के बारे में बातें करते हैं, अपन द्रव्स के बारे में, तत्वस एंड आश्रव, मोक्ष के बारे में बातें करते हैं. They translate into modern way of talking. You talk about theory of life. Drav is no different from theory of the biology, chemistry, physics, space, and time. Tattvas are no different from the theory of soul. Asrav, Bandh, वो सब theory of karma जैसे हैं, और अपन मोक्षा की theory of moksha हैं. We will develop what these theories are with the concepts there are. So Jain philosophy, traditional and modern. Yes, please.
I just wanted to share. I teach Pathshala to level 6, which is high school and college students. And most of the time, I'm discussing in theory of life, biology, chemistry, physics, space, and time. And they understand that because they are learning exactly this in their schools. And so being able to relate a lot of our traditional philosophy to this is a very nice way to bridge the gap.
Yes. So one of the things that I have learned is words are important. What words you use is critically important. And for our children, they are more important because they are being bombarded with information from WhatsApp, from Instagram. There are all these other media that they're putting ideas in their heads, good and bad. And so we need to accommodate to their thinking and put the construct of Jain Dharma, Jain religion, in their understanding. So what modern way of life, it derived from the traditional way, dravas, tattvas, all of them can be translated. So that is the philosophy. Then we can talk about the principles. Jain dharma ke apne 5 principles hain. Yes, they are critically important, the anuvrats, but we can talk about them as the core ones as ahimsa, anekantvad, and aparigraha, because they can relate to the many of the common practices that we have. In fact, we have distilled them into 24 practices. So yes, common word, ahimsa ke liye love, respect, and share. All that can be shared.
Mother,
And-
someone,
Yes,
I had
please.
shared this with someone, and
Mhm.
someone said, how can you change, the Jain fundamentals? You guys, are you changing that by remapping this? What is your answer to that?
No, what we're doing is relating and translating the fundamentals into the language that we use. Imagine if अगर अपन जैन धर्म में बोलते नहीं, जो ग्रंथ संस्कृत में लिखे हैं वो संस्कृत में ही रहेंगे, अपन हिंदी में नहीं ट्रांसलेट करेंगे, वो जो हिंदी में है वो हिंदी में रखेंगे, वो इंग्लिश में नहीं ट्रांसलेट करेंगे. Imagine if someone became so adamant that they said that there is a loss of meaning and so we will never translate. How practical would that be? Completely impractical. You would have generations after generations, the religion would become extinct. And that is what I fear in the back of my mind, that our religion, what motivates me is to say our religion could one time become extinct if we don't modernize in our expression of the religion. And that is why we do what we do. It is to take those jewels that we know from Jain tradition, those jewels that are well written and are in the Tattvat Sutra, and we take them and put them into concept. So we do it from the philosophy, we do it from the principles, and then they translate into modern day practices. जैसे ahimsa की practice है, vegetarianism, exercise, forgiveness, compassion, anekantvad, respect, open-mindedness, and we will go into more. This is just a showcase of what is there. So yes, we are taking those and moving them. I want to pause here for a minute. That is the bigger, broader concept that agle 3 hafte apan batein karenge, and each one of those slides has 10 to 15 slides there, and you can go on the website jainpath.org and you can actually see the Jain Path book that's there, very similar to the Jain Way of Life book, and is there. But सब पूछते हैं जब अपन philosophical construct conversation करते हैं कि मैं कौन हूँ, who am I? So Yogan Bhai, take us through this idea. If someone asks you in a sort of a modern context way, from a Jain perspective, who are you? Aap kaun ho? How would you answer this using this model?
I have been taught that I am the soul, I am not the body. I beg to differ. In fact, I am the body, I am the soul, and more importantly, I am really part of a family, community, and the world, because things have gotten really small. In the old days, you hardly traveled more than 10, 20 miles ever in your life. And nowadays, we're all over the map. So I believe that the new I is a combination of me, which is the body, the soul, the mind. And now I am not alone. My possessions, my work define me. I'm very much part of that. I spend 8 hours, if not more sometimes. My hobbies, the sports I like, I love playing squash, and that is me, mine. And then family and relationships. Number one ingredient to happiness. You know what that is? Relationships. People can have all the money, all the other things in the world, but if they don't have relationship, their happiness index is far, far lower. And we all know, without a community, without a city, community, country, the world, and our planet and universe, if we don't start thinking about this and addressing it, it is all part of I.
Got it. So
And
what we're doing here is creating a broader context of who the I is. That I is the me, the body, soul. It is the my, the possessions. It is us, and it is our. The reason this construct is important, we understand there's no question in our minds or anyone's mind कि apni atma is the real self. Yet in our day-to-day lives today, that is surrounded by many other things. If we do not acknowledge those things, if we do not address those things, happiness, equanimity, moksha will not come. So that is what is important to understand the concept, and we will dwell on this further. So the model is to think of the I is the me, my, us, and our, and happiness and equanimity, which is what we are seeking on the Jain path. On the Jain path comes through a process of taking our philosophy, our principles, our practices, and moving them to achieve ultimately what we hope. Is janam mein, yes.
Manoj, I was going to say exactly that. Go ahead and please finish. Is janam mein.
देखो, इस जन्म में मैं ready नहीं हूँ कि मोक्ष के लिए try करने के लिए. But I am ready for happiness, the pleasures and joys, and I'm ready for equanimity. Yes, a time may come. And yes, some may be, Muni Maharaj may be ready for moksha, but that time will come for some of us in this or another lifetime. But that is an important part to play, that it is a journey to achieve the happiness and equanimity for ourselves, our family members, and for our community. और अपना धर्म बताता है किस तरह से अपन ये चीज अचीव कर सकते हैं. That is the beauty of our religion. We just have to look and see it more. Yes. So
no, that's exactly what I was going to say in terms of somehow we get fixated on the word moksha. Oh yeah, a goal of life is moksha. Of course it is. But remember, just as Manoj Bhai said, happiness is a very important part. Equanimity is a very important part. And our Jain philosophy and principles and practices not only move us towards our own personal happiness and equanimity, but it takes everybody with it. And only then, if everybody is coming along with this, is our happiness and equanimity stronger. Great.
So in the next 5 to 10 minutes, I want to finish up and then some conversation as well. कि अगले 3 हफ्ते में अपन क्या करेंगे? What will be our journey together? And there's a lot of collective exercise that we will doing. So next week, अपन बातें करेंगे Jain philosophy के बारे में. क्या, what is the theory of life? What is the theory of soul? What is the theory of karma and theory of moksha? We will go into the depths. तत्वात सूत्र से और दूसरे ग्रंथों से क्या बताया गया है and what is relevant relate to modern life. So that is one conversation we'll have. Then we will have a following week conversation की Jain principles, ahimsa, anekantvad, aparigraha kya hai, and how do they relate to us today in our day-to-day lives. That's Jain principles. And then
I just want to go back and impress upon people that the triple A's at one level seem very simple, as we did in the elevator pitch that you saw earlier. But there are so many deeper and deeper levels to that we will learn and discuss. which will make this a lot more natural part of us. And that's the goal here.
Absolutely. And then we will talk about the practices. आपने तो अभी 2-3 practices के बारे में अपन ने बातें करा, vegetarian, vegan diet, forgiveness, अपन ने carefulness. I wrote an article in the New York Times and it got published on how अगर हमारे घर में कोई मच्छर कीड़ा होता है, how do we move it out and put it outside? The whole idea of carefulness, intoxicant-free, stress-free. We will talk about respect. We will talk about humility, open-mindedness. We will talk about equal rights. We'll talk about some rituals as well. These are 24 Jain practices, which are derived from ahimsa, anekantvad, and aparigraha. So what you are seeing here is a brief summary of our conversations, but there is going to be something much more detailed as well. What we have is a path to Jain journey. You will be getting this worksheet and the My Jain Path Journey, and it is going to be a conversation that we will be having. And the first week by week, we will be going through a conversation about where we are as individuals. So in the first week, what we ask you to do is simply, this is a sheet that will be shared with you if it's not already shared. It is going to be talking about just putting the name, age. So just like Manoj Jain, 58, live in Memphis, Tennessee, married with 3 children and a doctor. Then here comes the self-reflective part we'll ask you to do. It will be write 3 things that you are seeking in your life, personal, professional, and religious life. Yes, you can have 10 other things, but we ask you, share 3 things. Fill this sheet out. This is a process of becoming more aware. So I will share with you what my 3 things that I'm seeking. 1, seeking to share the treasures of Jainism with others. I really believe that this is important in life. Seeking to eliminate TB from India. That is the work that I am doing professionally in India. And then seeking to bring joy and happiness in my life and those of others around me. So take time afterwards to work on that is the first sheet. And then the other sheets are blank because we will get to those in a little bit. And then what we will do is share with you those sheets as well. And if you give me 1 minute, Yogen Bhai, maybe give an overview of what those sheets are, and then I will bring the other sheets up as well.
Yes. As we look at ourselves in the mirror, every day we see changes. We see our external self. अपनी image देखते हैं अपन mirror में. We have not taken the time to see our image internally, to see our core. And so I don't know how many of you are into health and so on. Everybody says we got to strengthen our core. Have we ever had a chance to look at our Jain core? Well, it's really hard to do. I mean, you can go through an MRI machine, but that's not going to show you much. And so just like you may know that in mental health, you can ask 9 questions and get a pretty good idea with 80% sensitivity and specificity about someone's mental health, their depression level, anxiety level, and so on. Similarly, we came up, again, through many years of work and through lots of your contribution, a list of questionnaires, which will tell you what level you're at in your progress towards a Jain way of life.
So for week 2, so we'll ask you to reflect on this, which is one is not Jain by just going to the temple or having a last name as Jain. Rather, one is Jain by his or her beliefs and number of Jain practices they hardwire in their life. These questions are derived from a self-evaluation related to 24 Jain practices. So what we ask you to do is to put a number. So maybe we can work on some of this. So Yogan Bhai, let's do some of this. There's a mini self-reflection tool, and then there is the complete self-reflection. The complete one takes about 20 minutes, and then at the end you get a score. The mini one takes about 5 minutes. And let us take a question. So for example, my open-mindedness. Yogan Bhai, I will ask you, 1, I force my views onto others and do not take time to understand others' views? 2, I understand that there are many views that make no active attempt to engage and understand others' views. I solicit and act on multiple views, and I'm willing to change my mind. I proactively listen, understand, and correlate different positions. I always observe and analyze from many views. In a scale, in that 1 to 5, where are you at this time in your life?
I am pleased to inform people that I'm at 4, and especially, well, there are people around me who may beg to differ at times, as we all know, but 4 is where I'm at, and especially when I'm in meetings at work and when my team is presenting and so on, I'm trying so hard to listen to them, to understand their view, and
Perfect.
to be able to question and to understand. And I do think that's made me a far more open-minded person.
Great. I will do the next question, which is my meditation and mindfulness. So number 1, I have no knowledge of the practice of meditation. I have knowledge and may consider practicing. I practice mindfulness occasionally, once or twice a month. I practice meditation mindfulness at least 2 to 3 times a week for 10 to 20 minutes. I practice meditation and mindfulness at least 20 minutes. I have not gotten to 5 yet. I'm at a 4 that I am practicing, and during Paryushan, I have made an idea of achieving going from 4 to 5. So all of you will have an opportunity. We will use this week by week. Week 1, exercise. Week 2, self-reflection. You will get a score that will be for your own self-reflection. Then we go into a conversation about happiness. We've talked a lot about this. What is our goal in life? And we will ask questions such as, are you happy? And then ranking that, what kind of happiness are you seeking? And then looking at a root cause, not until you get to the root cause. Is it happiness coming from health, affection, security, significance, equanimity? We will see more of that. And then we'll finish up on our last week as an exercise that we will have a set of priorities. We will look at those practices, and then you will see what is a high priority for me. Say for number 1 priority for me is a vegetarian vegan diet. In fact, I have achieved that. And I can say that I have achieved that diet. Another is being intoxicant free. Another is yoga and exercise in top priorities. Like that, we can
Manoj bhai, wait 1 second. Can you clarify for people? Do you want, I know that we'll be sending out these to each person. Do you want them to do all of them next week? No. Or only the week 2?
We'll just have them do the week 1 and week 2.
Great.
And we will do those later in the weeks to come. I'm just sharing them in general for people. We had promised that we would be with for an hour. I know we're reaching that hour, and we have gone through a lot of content. अपन बहुत बातें कर रहे थे, अपन ने दूसरों को बातें का इतना time नहीं दिया है. I will ask people your comments, your suggestions, your ideas. And as I do that, I want to again thank Edwin Rodriguez, Abhinav Bhatia. They have been critical in helping us, pulling and bringing you in. We are open for conversations. The book that we're talking about is available at www.jainpath.org. That has lots of details. आप देख सकते हैं वहाँ पे Jain Way of Life, www.jainwayoflife.org also has the Jain Way of Life book and others. So from the group, comments, questions, thoughts, what do people think?
Reflections.
Dr. Rajan Mehta, your thoughts, aapke ideas in hearing some of this?
Thank you, Manoj, for a nice presentation. मेरा जो मानना है कि ठीक है, मैं जैन हूँ, एक जैन परिवार में पैदा हुआ इसलिए जैन हूँ, पर जैन फिलॉसफी का, जैन लिटरेचर का बहुत अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं हो पाया। लेकिन मैं जो जितना भी मैंने सीखा, समझा या मैंने पढ़ा है, या मैं जिनसे हमारे जो धर्मगुरु हैं, महाराज साहब हैं, उनसे भी मिलता हूँ, बात करता हूँ, तो मेरा जो व्यू बनता है कि जो जैन फिलॉसफी है, जो कोर है, हार्ड कोर, जैनिज्म का जो हार्ड कोर प्रिंसिपल है, वो जैन फिलॉसफी से डिराइव होते हैं। तो जैन फिलॉसफी को बहुत अच्छे अंडरस्टैंडेबल लैंग्वेज में या बहुत अच्छी तरीके से हम लोगों ने नहीं समझा पाए किसी को, ऐसा मेरा मानना है। और इसी के बाद अगला फिर जो हमारे जैन जो रिचुअल्स हैं, तो सारा स्ट्रेस जो है पूरा समाज का भी, फैमिली का भी और हमारे धर्मगुरुओं का भी, वो स्ट्रेस पूरा जो है उन रिचुअल्स के ऊपर ज्यादा होता है बनिस्बत की एक हार्डकोर लर्निंग के ऊपर।
बात सही है, बिल्कुल सही है। और मैं आपसे ये बोलूंगा राजन भाई, आप बिल्कुल सच बोल रहे हैं कि जैन फिलॉसफी के बारे में अपन ज़्यादा बात अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं होती है, पर पिछले 20 साल से हम प्रेजेंटेशंस और कॉन्वर्सेशन कर रहे हैं, जैसे समय सार, तत्वार्थ सूत्र, अलग अलग ग्रंथ को लेकर उनकी जो है कोर मैसेज, उसके बारे में बातचीत करके, और जो कंटेंट आपसे शेयर करेंगे वो वहाँ से डिराइव्ड है। पर आप राइट है कि अपन रिचुअल्स में करते हैं। मैं डॉक्टर सोनी से भी पूछूंगा कि उनके क्या आइडियाज हैं, and if others want to say their ideas as well. So Dr. Upen Soni, your thoughts and ideas. You're on mute. Yeah, you're on mute.
Yes.
Unmute. Yeah, please.
So whatever in the next few sections you are going to propagate and explain to us would be a great thought and great practice for modern way of living and modern explanation and modern branding of Jainism. And as Rajan Mehta was saying regarding rituals etc., तो हम लोगों के रिलीजन में जो रिचुअल्स हैं और हम जिनको कभी भी कहते हैं कि प्रैक्टिस, जैसे रोज मंदिर जाना जरूरी है या रात को नहीं खाना, तो कभी कभी ये कुछ ऐसे कम्युनिटी में अदरवाइज भी प्रैक्टिस होते हैं। हेलो हेलो
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes. So जैसे हम बोलते हैं कि डॉक्टर्स को एप्रन पहन के जाना पड़ता है हॉस्पिटल में, जैसे आप बोलते हैं हम ऑफिस जाते हैं तो टाई लगा के जाते हैं, आप समझ गए। हम लोग बोलते हैं कि लंच टाइम ये है और डिनर टाइम ये है, उस टाइम पर हमको खाना खाने जाना है। तो वैसे ही बहुत सारी प्रैक्टिस हमारी डे टू डे लाइफ में एक कम्युनिटी के टुगेदरनेस के साथ में प्रैक्टिस होती है। जैसे हम सब एक साथ मूव करते हैं तो अपने आप वी स्टार्ट प्रैक्टिसिंग दैट वे। और अदरवाइज मेरा एक सोच और था कि जैन दर्शन और जैन फिलॉसफी के बारे में दैट इज वेरी ट्रू कि हम लोग पब्लिक के अंदर अभी तक अवेयरनेस या जागरूकता न ला पाए। लाइक we are not able to explain or promote Jainism, but directly indirectly हम जिस जैनिज्म और प्रिंसिपल की, जैसे योगेंद्र और मनोज ने भी बताया, योगेंद्र भाई मनोज भाई ने, कि उन प्रिंसिपल्स को देखा जाए तो हम हमारी डे टू डे लाइफ में हर रिलीजन प्रैक्टिस करवा रहा है, पर अब उसको वो प्रैक्टिस में हम ये बोले कि हम जैन ने ऐसा बोला है, वो बुद्धिज्म वाले नहीं मानेंगे, क्योंकि आज इंडिया के अंदर मैक्सिमम पॉपुलेशन ये जानती है कि नॉन वायलेंस वाज प्रोपोगेटेड एंड स्टार्टेड बाय बुद्ध एंड महावीर भगवान, पर सबसे ज्यादा लोगों को यही मालूम है कि वो महावीर भगवान, वो बुद्ध ने शुरू किया। अब उसी को प्रैक्टिस में गांधी जी लेकर आए। अब देखा जाए तो हमारा नॉन वायलेंस तो जैसा हम कहते हैं कि हमने यदि जैसा यू आर सेइंग अब रिगार्डिंग एनवायरनमेंट, रिगार्डिंग नहाते वक्त शावर के वक्त कम से कम पानी का यूज, सो दैट इज व्हाट जैनिज्म से कि आप जितना यूज करोगे तो उतनी हिंसा करोगे,
हिंसा कम होगी,
देर हिंसा होगी।
Exactly.
तो हम
Manoj, we should so, sorry, Dr. Soni, please finish. Yeah, Manoj, it's 10. It's 10:30.
Yes, we just finished 2 more minutes. I think
yeah,
Manish Bhai has something and then we will finish
and then
up.
we should end.
Yes. You're on mute, Manish Bhai. Yeah, go ahead.
I really enjoyed this session that we had. I would like to say that I was working on the same principles that you are working on, and I had already made notes on science versus soul. So I had made notes on quantum physics and what it talks about consciousness, and consciousness being the soul. So that was one aspect which I felt that I could relate this to the younger generations so that they would understand it better. Number one. Number two, like we say, certain rituals are not to be followed. I think that, you know, a student who goes to KG starts learning things like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. He has hardly any knowledge of the topic or the language, but still learns that. So same thing, we should also blindly accept it. Third, as my mother also teaches me, Nishchay Dharma and Vyavhar Dharma, they are two different things. So I think we should not confuse between the two. And
Yes.
I am very impressed by everything. I'm sorry it's dark here because I'm in a car. I stopped on the way just to put my point.
Very
But
nice.
It was an excellent talk. Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you
making
so
me
much.
part of this.
Great. We have a journey together. मुझे आपका ज़्यादा और टाइम नहीं लेना है. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. आपको वर्कशीट्स, वो जैन जर्नी की शीट्स मिलेंगी. Work on the first and the second one, and see. It is a self-reflective exercise, and you will enjoy it tremendously. You will see where you are in Jain Dharma. योगेन भाई साहब, एक बार अपन नमोकार मंच से खत्म कर दें अपना
Yes.
and we will have more conversations next week. ठीक है.
Eyes closed. Make sure your back is straight, please. Smile on your face. Take a nice deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. And say the Morka mantra. And please, as you're saying it, be mindful of the meaning of it. It's such a beautiful mantra.
Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayyanam, Namo Vachayanam, Namo Loisam, Savsam, Eso Pancha Namo Yaro, Savsa Pavapanash, Mangalam Chisavisyam, Paramam Hoyam, Om Shanti. Jai Jain everyone. Happy Paryushan. We will see you next week. Same time, same place. Thank you. And please invite others to join, and this will be video recorded and made available to you so they can join in by video, and we'll keep the conversation going, and we'll share the recordings with you as well. Bye-bye.